It was so sudden and so horribly unlike anything that had ever happened before to Diggory, even in a nightmare. They let out a scream. Instantly, Uncle Andrew's hand was over his mouth. "None of that," he hissed in Diggory's ear. "If you start making a noise, your mother will hear it, and you know what a fright that might do to her." As Diggory said afterwards, the horrible meaninglessness of getting in a chap in that way almost made him sick. But of course he did scream again. "That's better," said Uncle Andrew. "Perhaps you couldn't help it. It is a shock when you first see someone vanish. Why, it gave me a turn when a guinea pig did it the other night." "Was that when you yelled?" said Diggory. "Oh, you heard that, did you? I hope you haven't been spying on me." "No, I haven't," said Diggory. "But that's what happened to Polly." "Congratulate me, my dear boy," said Uncle Andrew, rubbing his hands together. "My experiment has succeeded. The little girl's gone, vanished, right out of the world." "What have you done to her?" "Sent her to, well, another place." "What do you mean?" asked Diggory. Uncle Andrew sat down and said, "Well, I'll tell you all about it. Have you ever heard of old Miss Lefray?" "Wasn't she a great aunt or something?" said Diggory. "Not exactly," said Uncle Andrew. "She was my godmother. That's her. There on the wall." Diggory looked and saw a faded photograph. It showed the face of an old woman in a bonnet, but he could now remember that he had once seen a photo of the same face in an old drawer at home in the country. He had asked his mother who it was, and his mother had not seemed to want to talk about the subject much. It was not at all a nice face, Diggory thought. Though, of course, with those earlier photographs, one could never really tell. Wasn't there something wrong about her, Uncle Andrew?" he asked. "Well," asked Uncle Andrew with a chuckle, "it depends what you call wrong. People are so narrow-minded. She certainly got very queer in later life. Did very unwise things. That's why they shut her up." "In an asylum, do you mean?" "Oh, no," said Uncle Andrew in a shocked voice. "None of that sort. Only in prison." "I say," said Diggory, "what's she done?" "Oh, poor woman," said Uncle Andrew. "She had been very unwise. There were a good many different things. We don't need to go into all of that. She was always very kind to me. But look here, what has all of this got to do with Polly? I do wish you'd—" "All in good time, my boy," said Uncle Andrew. "They let old Mrs. Lefray out before she died, and I was one of the very few people whom she allowed to see her in her last illness. She had got to dislike ordinary, ignorant people, you understand. I do myself, but she and I were interested in the same sort of things. It was only a few days before her death that she told me to go on an old bureau in her house and open the secret drawer and bring her a little box that I'd find there. The moment I picked up that box, I could tell by the pricking in my hand that I held something great secret in my hands. She gave it to me and made me promise that as soon as she was dead, I would burn it, unopened, with certain ceremonies. That promise I did not keep." "Well then, if it was jolly rotten of you," said Diggory. "Rotten," said Uncle Andrew with a puzzled look. "Oh, I see. You mean that little boys ought to keep their promises. Very true. Most right and proper, I'm sure, and I'm very glad you have been taught to do it. But of course, you must understand that rulers' thoughts, however excellent they might be for little boys, and servants, and women, and even people in general, can't possibly be accepted to apply to profound students and great thinkers and sages. No, Diggory, men like me, who possess hidden wisdom, are free of common rules, just as we are cut off from the common pleasures. Ours, my boy, is a high and lonely destiny." He said this with a sigh. He looked so grave and noble and mysterious. For a second, Diggory really thought he was saying something rather fine. Then he remembered the ugly look he had seen on his uncle's face the moment before Polly vanished, and then he once saw through Polly's and Uncle Andrew's grand words. "All it means," he said to himself. is that he thinks he can do more than he would like to get anything he wants. For I know it may contain some highly dangerous thing, for my godmother was a very remarkable woman. The truth is, she was one of the last mortals in this country who had fairy blood in her. She said there had been 2 others in her time. One was a duchess and the other was a charwoman. In fact, Diggory, now you're talking to the last man, possibly, who really had a fairy godmother. One was a duchess. There's something for you to remember, that you're an old man yourself. I bet she was a bad fairy, thought Diggory, and added out loud, what about Polly? How do you harp on that? As if that was what mattered. My first task, of course, was to study the box itself. It was very ancient, and I knew even then to know it wasn't Greek or Old Egyptian or Babylon or Hittite or Chinese. It was older than any of those nations. And that was a great day when I last found out the truth. The box was Atlantean. It came from the lost islands of Atlantis. This meant that it was centuries older than any of the Stone Age things they dig up in Europe. And it wasn't a rough, cruel thing then to like them either. From the very dawn of time, Atlantis was already a great city with palaces and temples and learned men. He paused for a moment, as if he expected Diggory to say something, but Diggory was disliking his uncle more every minute, and so he said nothing. Meanwhile, said Uncle Andrew, I was learning a good deal in other ways. It wouldn't have been proper to explain them to a child, about magic in general. That meant I could come to have a fair idea what sort of things might be in the box. By various tests, I narrowed down to the possibilities. I had to get to know some devilish, queer people, and it's to go down through the very disagreeable experience. That was what turned my head grey. One doesn't become a magician for nothing. My health broke down in the end, but I got better, and at least I actually knew. There was not really the least chance of someone overhearing them. He leaned forward and almost whispered as he said, the Atlantean box contained something that had only been brought from another world, when our world was only just beginning. What? Said Diggory. He was now interested in spite of himself. Only dust, said Uncle Andrew. Fine, dry dust. Nothing much to look at. Nothing to show for a lifetime of toil, you might say. When I looked at that dust, I took jolly good care not to touch it, and thought that every grain had once been in another world. I don't mean another planet, you know. They're part of our world, and you really could get to them if you went far enough. But really, another world, another nature, another universe, somewhere where you've never reached, even if you travel through space, this universe forever and ever. A world that could be reached only by magic. Well, Uncle Andrew rubbed his hands until his knuckles cracked like fireworks. I knew, he went on, that if only you could get in... if only you could get into the right form, that just would draw you back to the place it had come from. But the difficulty was to get it into the right form. All further experiments were failures. I tried them on guinea pigs. Some of them only died. Some exploded like little bombs. That was a jolly cruel thing to do, said Diggory, who had a guinea pig of his own. How do you keep getting off point, said Uncle Andrew. That's what creatures are for. I bought them myself. Let me see, where was I? Ah, yes. At last, I succeeded in making the rings, the yellow ones, but now a new difficulty arose. I'm sure now that a yellow ring would send any creature it touched the other place. What good would it be if I couldn't get them back to tell me what they'd found there? And what about them, said Diggory. A nice mess they'd be only if they couldn't come back. Well, you keep on looking at everything for the wrong point of view, said Uncle Andrew with a look of impatience. Can't you understand that the thing is a great experiment? The whole point of sending anyone into the other place is that I would find what it is like. Well, then why didn't you go yourself then? Said Diggory. Had hardly ever seen anyone so surprised and offended as his uncle did at this simple question. Me? Me? He exclaimed. The boy must be mad. A man of my life and in my state of health to risk the shock and danger of suddenly being flung into a different universe? I have never heard of something so preposterous in my life. Do you realise what you're saying? Think about another world means. You might meet anything. Well, I suppose you sent Polly into it then, said Diggory. His cheeks were inflamed with anger now. And all I can say, he added, even if you are my uncle, is that you behave like a coward, sending a girl into a place you're afraid to go yourself. Silence, sir, said Uncle Andrew, bringing his hand down on the table. I will not be talked to that by a little dirty schoolboy. You don't understand. I am the great scholar, the magician, the adeptus, who is doing the experiment. Of course I need subjects to do it on. Bless my soul, you have been telling me the next thing I ought to have asked the guinea pigs permission before I use them. No great wisdom can be reached without sacrifice. But the idea of my going myself is ridiculous. It's like asking a general to fight as a common soldier. So imposing I got killed, what will become of my life's working? Oh, do stop drawing, said Diggory. Are you going to bring Polly back? I was going to tell you, when you so suddenly and rudely interrupted me, said Uncle Andrew, that I did at last find out a way of doing the return journey. The green rings you draw back. Polly hasn't got a green ring. No, said Uncle Andrew with a cool smile. Then she can't get back, shouted Diggory, and it's all exactly the same as if you murdered her. She will get back, said Uncle Andrew, if somebody else will go after her, wearing a yellow ring himself and taking 2 green rings, one to bring himself back and one to bring her back. And now, of course, Diggory saw the trap in which he was caught, and he stared at his Uncle Andrew, saying nothing, with his mouth open wide. His cheeks had been gone very pale. I hope, said Uncle Andrew presently, in a very high and mighty voice, just as if he were a perfect uncle who had given one of the handsome tip and had some good advice. I hope, Diggory, that you're not going to give to showing the white feather. I should be very sorry to think of anyone in our family had not enough honour and charity to go to the age of a lady in distress. Oh, shut up, said Diggory. If you had had any honour and all of that, you'd be going yourself. But I know you won't. All right, I see I've got to go, but you are a beast, and I suppose you planned the whole thing so that she'd go without knowing it, and then I'd have to go after her. Of course, said Uncle Andrew with a hateful smile. Very well, I'll go, but there is one thing I jolly well mean to say first. I didn't mean believe in magic until today. I see now it's real. Well, if it is, I suppose that the old fairy tales are more or less true, and you're simply a wicked, cruel magician like the ones in the stories. Well, I've never read a story in which people of that sort aren't paid out to the end. I bet you will be, and serve you right. Of all the things Diggory said, this was the final that really went home. Uncle Andrew started, and there came a look over his face of such horror that, beast though he was, you could always feel sorry for him. But for a second later, he smoothed it all the way and said with a rather forced laugh, Well, I suppose that is a natural thing for a child to think. Brought up among women, have you been? Oh, wise tale, eh? I don't think you need to worry about my danger, Diggory. Wouldn't it be better to worry about the danger of your little friend? She's been gone for some time. If there was any dangers over there, well, it would be a pity to arrive at a moment too late. A lot you care, said Diggory fiercely, but I'm sick of this straw. What have I got to do? You must learn to control that temper of yours, my boy, said Uncle Andrew coldly. Otherwise you'll grow up like your Aunt Letty. Now, attend to me. He got up and put on a pair of gloves and walked over to the tray that contained the rings. He said, if they are actually touching your skin, wearing gloves, I can pick them up like this and nothing happens. If you carried one in your pocket, nothing would happen, but of course you need to be careful about not putting your hand in your pocket and touching it by accident. The moment you touch a yellow ring, you vanish out of this world. When you're in the other place, I expect, of course, this hasn't been tested yet. I expect the moment you touch a green ring, you vanish out of that world, and I expect to reappear in this. Now, I take these two greens and drop them into your right-hand pocket. Remember very careful which pocket the greens are in. G for green, R for right. GR, you see. Which are the first two letters of green. One for you and one for the little girl. And now you pick a yellow one for yourself. I should put it on your finger. If I were you, there's the less of a chance of dropping it. Diggory had almost picked up the yellow ring when he suddenly checked himself. Look here, what about Mother? Supposing she asks where I am? The sooner you go, the sooner you'll be back, said Uncle Andrew cheerfully. But you don't really know whether I can get back, said Uncle Andrew. Uncle Andrew shrugged his shoulders, walked across the door, unlocking it, threw it open, and said, Oh, well, very well then. Just as you please, go down and have your dinner. Leave the little girl to be eaten by the wild animals, or drowned, or starved in the other world, or lost there for good. If that's what you prefer, it's all one to me. Perhaps before tea time, you better drop in on Mrs. Plummer and explain she'll never see her daughter again. She was too afraid to put on a ring. By gum, said Diggory. Don't I just wish I was big enough to punch your head. Then he buttoned up his coat, took a deep breath, and picked up the ring. And as soon as he thought then, he would always have the afterwards too. And he could not decently have done anything else.